How does Wendy's make it relevant to the next generation, who clearly they want, because that's the audience that's going to be buying the burgers? Because I know I've kind of aged out of cholesterol. We're no longer that ideal target market that's going to consume as much as the customer base too. So how do you stay relevant to that younger generation?
If you think about the burger landscape today, McDonald's owns the value lane. They've got low prices, they've got global ubiquity. And then at the other end, there's the restaurants like Shake Shack and Five Guys. They're giving you a more elevated experience. And Wendy's is sitting somewhere in between.
Wendy can say what she wants to say, gets herself into trouble, goes a little too far. Dave can pull it back and say, wait a minute, Wendy, let's not forget about the ingredients, or, you get the yin yang situation. But we're going to lead with Wendy. Wendy's going to be our voice, our character throughout the entire branded experience.
I think it is like a crisis in identity. Pick a lane. What do you decide you want to do? Because the burger world is so saturated in all different ways that their challenge is not just McDonald's.
Welcome to We Fixed It. You're welcome. The show where we take over companies, you come along for the ride, and we try to put them back better than we found them.
Today, we're going to talk about that iconic redhead of the fast food world. No, not Ronald McDonald. We're talking all about Wendy's. But take away Wendy, and what comes to mind? Square patties, Frosties, maybe their snarky social media. Anything else? Well, that's the problem. Wendy's is stuck squarely in the middle of the fast food landscape. There's no Whopper. They have fewer locations. They're not the cheapest. What are they? There's a lot riding on that question. Because right now, things are not so hot. But not to worry, we're on it. Your fearless fixers are going to get Wendy's out of the middle and put them back on top. And we're going to bring in some help. Our guest today is Paul Tuscano, former Chief Digital Officer at KFC US, where he led one of the largest and most complex digital transformations in the fast food and QSR category. Under Paul's leadership, KFC accelerated digital growth, rebuilt its UX organization, launched a wildly successful loyalty program with over 7 million members and a lot more. Before that, Paul spent nearly a decade transforming Marriott's mobile and on-site digital products. He's also held major roles at Verizon. When it comes to customer experience, digital transformation, and how legacy brands reinvent themselves, which we'll need today, Paul has seen it all. So, fixing Wendy's should be a piece of cake, but we'll have to see. Paul, welcome to the show. Tell us more about yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been in the QSR industry for 2 years, so not very long in terms of tenure compared to some of my peers. But before that, I was at Marriott, where I ran also the food and beverage business there in terms of digital experiences. So when it came to like table reservations at our restaurants, room service in our hotels, was managing that, the software experiences there. So I have a lot of experience with guest experiences when it comes to digital and what we like to call phygital nowadays. It's the physical and digital world. How do you merge those together? Using the digital to stay relevant, to get people into the restaurants, right? And then, whether it be promotions or just some catchy social media gimmick to get them in and get the attention, right? To get them top of mind. So there's come things at play like marketing elements, but then ultimately once we get them in the door, right, then I rely on my peer group to kind of like operations, staffing, training, and then obviously making sure we have a great menu that people want to just keep coming back for. So it takes a team, and I had a great team at KFC, and I think we were in the middle of a pretty decent turnaround. So I'm excited to stay close to the topic.
Nice. Thanks so much, Paul. You've got the right ingredients to join us today. So it's great to have you here. Before we really get going, Kadira, pile it on. What exactly is going on with Wendy's?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we have to pause and acknowledge that this moment with Wendy's has been building for years. And to understand what's happening today, we have to go back to where Wendy's started. So we all know Dave Thomas. Wendy's was founded in 1969 by Dave in Columbus, Ohio, with really one simple idea. And that was fresh, high quality burgers made with never frozen beef. And that commitment to freshness that they made, it wasn't just about marketing. It was really their brand's DNA. So, Aaron, you mentioned the square patties, but it was also open kitchens, quality is our recipe, everything that they did reinforced this feeling that Wendy's wasn't trying to be the cheapest fast food option. No, they were trying to be better than what was out there. And over time, they built this reputation as the sharper, slightly more premium alternative in the fast food space. So they branched out early. If you recall, they were out there with salads and baked potatoes and chili and breakfast, and now I'm hungry. And let's not forget, Erin, you mentioned that snarky social media. Again, I always say give that team a raise. That provided them with so much cultural currency. It really set the tone for an entire generation of brand personality. But that cultural clout doesn't automatically turn into sales. And that's really where the positioning problems start. If you think about the burger landscape today, right? McDonald's owns the value lane. They've got low prices, they've got global, ubiquity, their dominant convenience. And then at the other end, there's the restaurants like Shake Shack and Five Guys and, these fast casual players that own the premium quality lane. So they're talking about better ingredients and higher prices, but they're giving you a more elevated experience. And Wendy's is sitting somewhere in between. Their prices are nearly identical to McDonald's, but they're not perceived as a true value option. And then at the same time, they're not premium enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with a Shake Shack or a Five Guys. And that's where strategists, call this kind of being stuck in the middle, where it's too expensive to win on price, not differentiated enough to win on quality. And that identity tension only gets sharper when you look at the menu. So if you ask someone, what is Wendy's hero item? The single product that kind of defines the brand. The closest answer you'll probably get is the Frosty. Now, look, do not come for the Frosty. I love a Frosty. It is a beloved icon for sure. But it's not exactly the kind of flagship menu item that's going to anchor, this massive strategic comeback that they need, right? They don't have a Big Mac. They don't have a Whopper. They don't have, a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich. And in a saturated market, when you don't have a clear menu identity, that's going to become a problem. So Wendy's is fighting back. They're responding, right? They are launching one of the biggest transformation efforts in its history. And it's an initiative internally called Project Fresh. And Project Fresh is a full reset of the business. So they're closing, roughly 300 underperforming stores in the US. They're renovating, they're refranchising. They're going to be investing heavily in AI and other technology. They're rethinking their brand positioning. To be clear, this is a full rebuild. Wendy's is trying to reclaim the lane that it once owned. And so, what we want to talk about on this episode is how does a legacy brand like Wendy's get out of the middle of its category? What does that actually look like? And can this Project Fresh plan help Wendy's escape the middle and build a lane of its own? I think it's important to also kind of just point out that, this is not just a story about Wendy's. The whole fast food industry should be paying attention, right? Because this is about really what happens when a legacy brand tries to evolve in a market that's being pulled apart from both the top and the bottom. And the tough choices that I think all of the fast food restaurants are going to need to start to make to stay relevant. So this is a biggie. If we're up for it, let's get into it and fix this one.
Well, let's say what we're here to fix first off. And Kadira, wonderful summary and getting us to this point. Thank you. Dave Thomas, was not a boardroom guy in the traditional sense. He was a roll up your sleeves and greet the customer and transparency in the kitchen and get it done. Looking at Wendy's today, is it representative of the founder who's been gone for a while now? Have they strayed from its 1969 origins, or is it the same company at its core and it's just out of step? Like, foundationally, what are we dealing with?
I think you bring up a really good point because I think it is like a crisis in identity, right? Kadira, you've brought up a couple things here, like pick a lane. What's your lane? What do you decide you want to do? And I think that because the world of let's just focus on the burgers. The burger world is so saturated in all different ways that their challenge is not just McDonald's, right? Like maybe McDonald's is the least of their worries. Well, it's not true, but let's just say that. But they've got the cult favorite In-N-Out. They've got Smash Burger, Five Guys, all the things that you talked about
Is that elevated? I guess it is. It's elevated in price for sure. Like you've seen online where people are like, I door dashed smash burgers and it was $59 per burger. Like back day, and they're like freaking out about that. They're like, a burger and shake? What? So I do feel like it's a crisis of brand and identity as well. And so like I mean, I know that they're going through this phased approach of like thinking about this very carefully, but like I kind of challenge a company when they say, well, we're going to try to efficiency and costs and things like that. It's like, are you serious? Like, how much less can you charge, right? Like, without like sacrificing the taste or sacrificing all the things. And I was saying earlier, this is a tough topic for me because I have wonderful memories of high school. We used to go to Wendy's late night and our buddies worked there and the Frosties with French fries, and like sitting there at, 12 midnight and, getting in trouble and stuff like that. So I love the idea of Wendy's, but I don't think, for example, my children who are now all older have ever even been in a Wendy's, which is kind of sad to me. And so like, I love this idea of refreshing their brand, but at the same time, I'm like, how like everything old is new again? I'm like wondering, like maybe they need to go back to vintage, like a vintage Wendy's and be like, bring back that, like, because like now Stranger Things, all those things, all those shows, everything's like a 90s, 80s thing vibe. Like what if they like pare down their menu? What if they thought about those things and thought about like what were we known for and how do we go back there? Because like all the fast food places, I mean, Paul, you can talk about KFC, but like when you see like all the things on the menu these days, like really? Like how does a franchise owner actually provide quality with like that huge menu and then be asked to like run this business as like tightly as possible? I just feel like the margins aren't there, and I feel like closing a few of the low performers is one thing, but like now you've lost trust with your franchise owners as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I mean, speaking of, is the restaurant, who it was when Dave first opened it, in the 60s. I think they have a choice to make. I think, Melissa, that's a really good point. Pick a lane. They have a choice to make. Maybe they build on or continue to, double down and stay true to the values that Dave first introduced, but then they also can evolve at the same time and, kind of step into this AI age and what needs to happen to make sure that they're partnering successfully in communities with their franchisees and all the things. So I don't necessarily think that they have to like pick or choose, whether they're going to kind of, bring Dave into, who the restaurant needs to be today. I think that they can pick. And again, that might be things like values, for example. I think the other thing that's really important, when we talk about a brand like Wendy's or any of these other fast food restaurants that have grown beyond just one or two stores in one town, is really thinking about what culture needs to look like across the franchise, right? We're talking about hundreds, thousands of stores in the US, outside of the US. And I think it's important to remember like culture doesn't have to be identical at every store. That's why you hire people local to the community. There's going to be those local touches. Eating at a Wendy's in Chicago might feel a little bit different than in Des Moines, right? But I think what the customer is expecting is going to be that Wendy's vibe. So we've talked about like, their bold personality and snarkiness. Is that something that you experience, at every restaurant that you're like, yeah, I like that. I can dig that. Is it friendly service? Is it clean dining rooms? Is it food made the way that the brand promises? That's how you show that culture. That might be how, again, you're bringing the restaurant from 1969 into present day. It's not easy, right, to get all of these franchises on the same page because to use like, I would compare this to like you're basically trying to manage an entire league, not just a single team to get there. But it's doable. And y'all know me in playbooks, right? Like I think Wendy's as the brand and its headquarters can set the playbook. So again, What does that look like? That looks like values. It looks like training. It looks like standards. It looks like expectations. It looks like even incentivizing your people, your franchisees and your employees in those stores to make it happen. Because when I am having an experience at a Wendy's, for example, I'm not thinking about headquarters. I'm thinking about the restaurant 10 minutes up the street from me that's giving me my fries hot every single time. It's the people who are going the extra mile to get my order right. So again, the execution has to be local. That's really where you're going to experience the culture and consistency of the restaurant.
Ooh. Yeah, I think what you're saying hits exactly. So a lot of it doesn't matter what restaurant it is. Everything you talked about, it's like it has to be consistent, right? But as we're talking about this, honestly, I hadn't given Wendy's a thought in a long time, and we have one like in our town center. And but as we're talking about Dave Thomas, like everything that he represented, if it actually reminds me of Chick-fil-A today. Like when you go into a Chick-fil-A and the quality of service, I never actually knew the guy, but from the commercials as a kid, I was like, wow, that's like a really nice guy. And I'd love to go eat at a Wendy's because of him. And that's the sentiment that Chick-fil-A creates for their customers. And they just go back. I mean, because look, we did the whole chicken analysis, right? We have all these competitors. And when you think about the like hot and fresh, definitely they spot on, right? They've got the volumes to be able to pump out like good quality chicken all the time. That's never sitting. So Chick-fil-A, but the chicken itself isn't that much better than Church's or Raising Cane's or even KFC for that matter,
Right.
right? So the quality of the food definitely matters, but then there's the experience that the staff gives, right? And it's restaurants always clean, they're very friendly, very welcoming. You want to go back, right? And the efforts that they make in terms of recruiting and the types of people they recruit and how they manage the location, because it's a pseudo franchise-ish model, right? It's like there is clear ownership all the way down to the kid who's like bringing the drink to your table, right? They know their job, they know they have to please, and it's I mean, especially with the minimum wages, it's hard to get that commitment from those employees to do that every day, all the time, right? At high pressure, like for these, a lot of them are young people, and then you've got a lot of um, newly immigrants that are in the country that are working at these places. So how do you maintain that quality of service that just keeps it positive, right? Gives that
Right.
positive association for people to have them keep coming back, right? So that's once you get them in the door, you just got to be able to keep them. And I think it's all about the operations and the staffing that makes a difference.
Yeah, I love that idea of building that experience so that it's one that you want to share with others, you want to come back, all the things. Paul, I'd like to ask you specifically, just because of your expertise, is how do you use embedded tech and even AI to a certain extent in these models to help turn around a food industry titan like Wendy's?
Even now, like KFC is still kind of making their changes, and we've got a huge parent company like Yum, who's providing a lot of the new tech, and you've probably seen some of the what they refer to as Byte, a whole suite of products. AI is at the core of it, so introducing that to our brands and then ultimately to our franchisees, it all comes at a cost, by the way. So the investment is definitely needed, and there's opportunities to improve a lot of these operational elements, right? So that the folks don't have the burden of having to deal with, at least in our case, like how much do I have to prepare of XYZ based on demand, right? So there's more predictive models, right? So you're not overwhelming your staff, because let's keep in mind, staffing is really hard around. Like it's hard to find people. So
Right.
you're running, with smaller staff, turnover is really high. So to keep having to retrain people and then also maintain that positivity that you need for your customers. So trying to reduce their burden of the work that they have to do with technology is what we're trying to do. But, some of it, like, there's only so much we can do, right? A lot of it ends up being just dealing with the customer. And then also, the other part of it is just making sure you have a sharp menu that people want.
Yeah, one of the things I was trying to remember about like why Wendy's was different than McDonald's, for example, at the time, and I'm sure it is today too, but Wendy's was like the customizable burger, right? Fast food burger, where I don't know if you remember early on, like McDonald's, like if you told them you didn't want onions on your burger, it was like, no, sorry, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to take them off yourself. So I feel like that's lends really well into like these kiosks and like the tech world where, like I know there's a local burger joint that we like to go to, and they give you a piece of paper and they have all the things on there, right? Like onions, lettuce, tomato, mayo, ketchup, pickles, hot peps, whatever, and you just check, right? And so like that would be like kind of a cool, fun experience going in. And then the thing that would make it so nice is that it's personalized. So it is attached to your account and your app so that the next time you come in, it says, is this what you want, the junior cheeseburger with this, and this? Or would you like something else? Right. You know what I mean? And so like kind of creating that feeling of like, to Paul, to your point of this like really personalized experience that makes you feel like, oh, I'm going home, Kadir, right? Like I'm going home. They always know I want a chocolate frosty and I want extra hot fries and all the things, right? And so I think that that's an opportunity for them to lean into that too, where, you kind of see in a lot of different industries when we talk about transformational branding of a legacy brand, like some of the tech and AI and some of those things, those are table stakes now, right? Like
He did.
everybody has those kiosks, right? How do you make it different? And maybe the difference is you've got Snarky Wendy there. Like, what's taking you so long? Decide, just, whatever you want, that personality. Or it's really that inviting, it's, AI generated Dave, right? And he's like, welcome. I'm so excited to see you again, friend. And like, you know what I mean? And so, like, you can kind of choose your personality of who you deal with. And I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But I think Wendy's has to understand that some of the things that they're moving towards are not necessarily that different than what you find other places. So they're going to have to figure out how do they make it different, right?
The tech stuff that you mentioned is table stake. Like everybody has that, like the menu, the personalization. Now the real thing is kind of the recommendation, because we want you to we always want to increase your basket size, right? So we
Right.
want to be able to recommend things, and we want especially when you talk about like, hey, you've got a complicated menu or a big menu. We were talking about that earlier. It's like, hey, how do you put that in front of the customer, right? How do you take that, the bottom of the menu item that like people just need to discover, right? That could be your superstar, but you can't. It's just your menu's too big, right? So there's these opportunities with tech and AI to understand what your flavor profile is and then appropriately recommend, right? So that's definitely the opportunity, and that takes the data. You got to be able to harvest the data to be able to present that kind of stuff and apply the AI. So that's kind of what a lot of people are going to be struggling with, is the quality of their data. What do they have? Do they have the loyalty program that's been tracking all this stuff for you? So you can really personalize the experience, because otherwise everything else is going to be the same. Like it doesn't matter where you go, it's like, hey, personalize, customize your burger, all that stuff. Everybody has it, right? Now it's like, truly, how can I recommend something for you? And then not only that, but the great opportunity with this is when you think about your menu strategy and what you're going to introduce, because all these limited time offers. Hey, I want to do a partnership with Frank's Hot, or Mike's Hot Honey, like that. This information that you have of your customers and you see their flavor profiles will lead you to all these different partnerships potentially, right? Or new flavors, right? So, and that's truly, I mean, one of the things that we were looking at was like, hey, what are the flavors that people really want, right? And what should our kitchens be working on, our innovation team should be working on to really differentiate us, what's it called? This, not churches, I was going to say Raising Cane sauce, right? Like everybody talks about Raising Cane sauce. It's the only sauce they have, but it's like supposed to be amazing, right? Or the Chick-fil-A sauce, right? Their branded sauce. So what do we got to keep doing to understand that? And, when you do the multiple sauce things, what people are picking. You start learning their flavor profiles pretty quick. So when you launch like a jalapeno honey or something, you're like, hey, you guys that like the sriracha stuff, come check this out, right?
Yeah.
I love that idea too, because I do also think we've talked about this before with Starbucks and other like In and Out, like the secret menu, right? Like, this is one of those opportunities where you get like this kind of viral thing going. And then you feel special, and there's FOMO like, oh, why did I not get the secret menu items like the jalapeno honey offered to me, right? You know what I mean? My friend did, and all of this kind of thing. And so I really feel like there's an opportunity there. But again, I feel like these are the kinds of things where just having a kiosk, to your point, like everybody has kiosk, right? That's what you have to have, or an app, and like it's not just about pushing coupons for free fries on Friday, which of course I do love from McDonald's, but it's about offering you a personalized, menu item, right? And saying, hey, and maybe for Kadira, it would be like, hey, we're thinking about introducing, I know they're doing this, I think, Frosties with, Oreo cookie chunks or whatever they're trying to do. I mean, I don't know if they're trying to become Dairy Queen or what, but like, Kadira, would you like to try one for $1? That kind of thing. And you might be like, yeah, I'll try it. So,
Yeah, Wendy's has a secret menu too. So, and that's I call that table stakes also. And, a lot of it is how high can you stack your burger, and that has to do with the customization side. But Paul, I like what you're saying about introducing novelty or, something differentiating. But I think part of the problem is the QSR fast food industry gets together, whoever the heads of secret committees, and decides that spicy pickle is going to be the flavor of the year. And then you see it percolate everywhere, or sriracha honey or whatever, and that's not a differentiator when everyone has it. It's the same release at the same time. So do you want McDonald's version or do you want Wendy's version? Wendy's is not winning that battle. So can they create something outside of menu parity that's going to say, look, we are ingredient focused, we're quality focused, we're experience focused, come to us, and we have this that no one else can replicate. Like they haven't done that. And they have diehards that have preference. So you like the Frosty better than a milkshake or a, treat somewhere else. Great. People will ride and die for Wendy's and whatever their food of choice is there. But outside of the core committed shrinking, as we see from the numbers audience, what can they, is it technology, certainly, like bring it up at least to par of everybody else. That's going to keep them alive. But what's going to move them forward? That's what we're here to figure out.
I mean, look, I definitely think, I think what we're all saying here, and, we talked about even in the intro, is definitely they have to figure out what is their signature kind of menu item. Again, the Frosty isn't going to carry it. Again, don't take it away, but it's not going to carry it. I love, Melissa, your point about, again, is it like, I'm blanking on the term, but there's some way to kind of reintroduce Dave back into the brand? I think they should go all in on the snarkiness and personality that they have on social media. Like, I would love to see them bring that from social media and online somehow into the stores. Now, that may not mean that they're going to get all of the folks at the register to participate, but like, how could they introduce that? How could they bring that experience there? Now we're kind of, again, talking about this is kind of the Wendy's vibe that I'm experiencing and I almost get a kick out of when I'm going for my burger. You all probably remember, even I'm blanking on the actress's name, but remember their Where's the Beef commercials, right? My understanding is that made them so much money and drove sales and, got them recognized in such a big way. Like, what's going to be that for them today? And again, I would argue it's their social media personality. Bring that into the restaurants. I think we would get such a kick out of it. I think it could be a game changer. And again, they already were kind of owning that from an online perspective. Why not bring it into the stores somehow? I'm going to go then on the other side of this on one of the ways that I think also is a differentiator from a brand. Of course, I'm going to talk about social responsibility, right? I think that they have such an opportunity to break out and own something meaningful that maybe their fast food competitors aren't doing or aren't doing as loudly. And that would be things around like ethical sourcing or fair labor, for example, right? Like, think about if, again, as a part of this whole Project Fresh initiative, they're like, look, you can grab a quick burger. That's what we want. We want you in our stores to do that. You can also still feel good about how it was made. And we're going to be practical. We're not going to be preachy about it. But a part of our whole transformation plan, we want you to know that We're transparent in our supply chain for beef and produce. We're committed to living wages, for the folks working in our stores. We are, doubling down on sustainability and packaging. We're partnering with suppliers who are meeting really strict, traceability and welfare standards. Like, especially now, customers and the general public love that. They would be all over it. And I think it's something that the competitor can't easily copy, without
I
really
agree with
doing
you. I agree
right,
with you.
without doing some work behind the scenes, right? Like, you can't just kind of slap a tagline on something and talk about supply chain and beef and produce. Like, you got to walk that walk. You got to make operational changes and commitments. And so think about if Wendy's were to really lean in here as a part of this whole plan and say, okay, in addition to these 3 or 4 things we're doing in store and this experience we're providing you, we also want to talk to you about ethical sourcing. Be consistent, show up with your receipts. That also could be a differentiator and would play a big part in their transformation.
I love it because it's also redefining fresh, right? Like it's taking fresh and taking it to the nth degree and saying, this is what fresh means to us here at Wendy's. And like to your point, it would have all the names of where they're sourcing the beef, where they're sourcing their lettuce, what all the different kinds of things. And I do think that that would be, that's probably more engaging while somebody's waiting for their order versus watching a college or a high school kid slap a tomato on your burger and you're like, did they wash their hands? Like, when was the last time they changed gloves? Right? Like that kind of thing. So, like, there's this whole idea of like fresh as if you can see it, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, I think all of you have been in places where you're watching them make your whatever burrito or sandwich and you're kind of like, ooh, I
I'd
don't
rather
know.
not see it.
Yeah, I'd rather not keep that, right? So that would be a really cool visual, right? Like if they had like a running board or something like that, or decals, and made it feel fresh in their actual where they are. I love that, and even like testimonials, right? The rancher saying thank you, right? And telling their origin story. I mean, I think we were all inspired last week by the origin story from Psionic, and origin stories are important. Customer testimonials, Paul, you know this, like that's what gets you return customers, coming back to Marriott or coming back to wherever. You're always going to look for the like, how do I kind of align with whatever that story is? So
Mm.
I love that, Kadira. I think that's actually a really good point.
Paul, you're no stranger to legacy brands. And, KFC famously brought the Colonel back and has reached into the past to say we still have our past values and ethos and we're future forward and all the, what's the balance? How do you help companies walk the line between hat tips to the past without being beholden to it and this digital transformation?
I think one of the things, and when we were initially looking at the whole plan, bringing the kernel back and how do we do it, and it's truly making sure that those values of days of past still line up with today, right? So, seeking quality and the freshness of ingredients. Like, he was notorious, right? Like, there was a story about him going into a kitchen and he tasted the gravy and he was like, this isn't up to par. And he actually he pitched it, like he threw it across the kitchen. He was like, this can't be the standard. And that's that value. Like, everybody loves good food, right? So if you can prove that, hey, we care about consistency, quality, and taste, and that's what the kernel represents, right? So we've changed it from that kind of what it used to be, like touring the country and being at Disney World and all that kind of stuff. So really focus on what made him quote unquote a chef, right? Is that discipline for quality. So that's what they've brought back. And I think and I love the idea of bringing back Dave Thomas, because in the same vein, because he represented, like, anybody of any Gen Xer remembers like what he represented, right? So if you can bring that back, because everybody loves that, right? And as I said before, like, Chick-fil-A is doing it very well, and it's like disseminated into the entire culture of the company at every restaurant. So you can bring back someone like Dave Thomas, and it still means a lot. Like, what he represented is values that are still appreciated today. So you just got to be able to lean in on that. Now, what I think would be interesting is, how do you do that, still have that, what you were saying, like sort of snarkiness in the social media, and how does that marry together? And I was curious, because I haven't seen any commercials from Wendy's. I've seen their social media stuff, but I haven't seen actually any commercials. And it would be interesting to see some of that pull into their marketing, right? And then even their digital experiences. So it kind of all flows together. Obviously, we still want everybody to have a positive experience in the restaurant, right? Like Dave Thomas would have wanted. But just to attract them and get them engaging in, the vibe of a cool and hip brand, that would be interesting.
And for people that haven't been following, Wendy's has a very active social media following. They're very, I guess, reactionary in a good way. They call things the way they see them. They're not afraid to be a little provocative, and they get big reactions. And that, at least on social, at least from, being on the pulse of what's happening in the moment, they've got that part nailed. And what
Yeah.
we're saying is it's not translating into the in-store environment, which is a little more passive and neutral, and not. I wouldn't say they take a stance in the in the store experience. Go for it, Melissa.
No, I was saying that, like, I was thinking of kind of a potential fix, kind of piggybacking on what Paul mentioned about Dave, is, bringing back, I'm all about the vintage thing, about old Wendy's, kind of thing, as well as new, and like bringing back Dave Thomas's signature menu items. Meaning this is like, maybe it's, it's his favorite burger with his favorite toppings, right? Fries and a frosty, or whatever his go-to meal was, right? And like saying, "Oh, you want a Dave's meal?" right? That kind of thing. And then like you could have a Wendy's meal, and Wendy's got jalapeno spicy chicken nuggets or whatever she's got, and that would be kind of a fun way to kind of incorporate that as well. But I do think kind of bringing back that core value, because I think what we look at when we think about Dave is that he's the core, he's the foundation of Wendy's, obviously. So like, how do you bring that back into the day to day, especially with like these really complex menus and all of the things? I think it's like almost like that simplicity, like signature simplicity, and going back to basics is like a wonderful thing. I think that would be a great way for them to start.
I love that. I love the idea of like Dave's favorite items. We all love nostalgia, right? Like, and to your point, Dave was just like you thought of Dave, you thought of Wendy's, you thought of Wendy's, you thought of Dave. And so how cool would it be, even if it's a campaign that they run, right? Again, this is a part of this transformation. I think that would be so cool. And they can figure out ways to weave in the snarkiness. Again, maybe that does stay online, the clapbacks and stuff like that. Maybe that's not in the restaurants that they do with their customers, and that's fine. But maybe the way to go is to bring Dave back. I think that would be phenomenal.
I'm not picturing like a 50s diner where they, throw straws at you and pop gum in your face, create
No.
that whole immersive retro experience. But yeah, there could be something. We'll get to our fix in just a little bit, but there could be something about carrying over the social aesthetic into the store environment and bringing that to life. Again, not to the point of distraction. You're there to order a meal and get on with your day. But to make it known, you're in a Wendy's. If you took away the sign, you'd still know where you were.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
Well, here's a question to everybody. Like, so we're talking, as I think we're all Gen Xers here, right? So we're talking about nostalgia and Dave. How does Wendy's make it relevant to the next generation who clearly they want, because that's the audience that's going to be buying the burgers. Because I know I've kind of aged out of, I'm going to say the C word, but heavy cholesterol food. So we're no longer that ideal target market that's going to consume as much as they need their customer base too. So how do you make Dave relevant to that younger generation?
Well, I'd say KFC did it. The younger generation, the Gen Alpha, didn't have memories of the Colonel back in the day, and maybe never overlapped in real time. But you take the building blocks of the Colonel and you put it out to a new audience and say, look, you may not know this about us, but here's who we are. They did it in a way that it connected and it continues to connect. So can Wendy's follow, the same process? They probably could if they chose to go all in and say Dave's back.
Yeah.
And I also think, like, you bring up a good point, Paul, is like we might have aged out of that, but at the same time, now we have children or we have a generation beneath us. And so like they could even lean into that and say, this is where your mom used to get her Frosties. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and do a promotion where it's like, if I bring my kids, let's say they get a day's value meal, like some sort of, or they get a Wendy's special, a taste sampler, right? So that they get a chance to kind of hone in to what is it that they're missing out on with Wendy's, because I think that would be, I get what you're saying, is that like it is a very crowded space, and like kids today, they're like, oh, I would rather get a Freddy's because I like the fries at Freddy's or whatever, and they have ice cream there or concretes there, all the kinds of things. So I think that it is a challenge because Wendy's, the competitive landscape is so full right now for them. It's not like when they started, when it was just McDonald's, right? And Burger King. It's like
Right.
now it's everything.
Well, holy cow, we've got to fix the situation. We've got a lot of building blocks here, though. So we've got transparency. We've got keep going with your digital transformation. That's the price of entry. So the kiosk, the self-service, maybe make those shortcuts where do you want Dave's meal? This is what Dave enjoyed. If this is your entry point, if you don't know what to order, shortcut to Dave's meal or Wendy's meal, which has some personality and some attitude to it. Or maybe Aaron's meal, where it remembers me and pre-configures it. And do I want Dave's meal or my meal? I want my meal without pickles this time. And mass customization at scale. If they're all in on customization, just keep that going and keep it to, make sure that experience, they're all about Dave's values experience, make sure the experience is there. If we keep doing that, we keep valuing our workers, keep bringing them into the experience that customers get when they walk in the door. Make sure that you're at a Wendy's and not some interchangeable, could be anywhere kind of location. If we put all of those ingredients together and hand them over to Wendy's, Melissa, how did we do? Are we in a better spot?
I think we've uncovered a lot of opportunities for them. I don't know that we've actually fixed it. I feel like they've got so much to have to fix that I'm a little skeptical that they'll be able to get it totally right. But I love what we've come up with. I love like that signature simplicity, going back to their core values, creating that personalized experience. I'd love to see them do that. And I think that if they do it well, people will be willing to pay a little more. So it's not just about being the value meal, like the cheapest out there. So I do feel like that, to me, is very promising.
All right. So we're partway there for you. Kadira, what do you say?
I'm going to say yes. I think our fixes are solid. And again, I think they line up really well with the Project Fresh plan. So I'm really, eager to see how this all turns out. I think that the key here for Wendy's is really around simplicity, which we've talked about, and clarity more than anything. Just clarity around who are they as a brand, clarity around menu leadership. Again, what is going to be that signature menu item or experience that they're going to provide? Clarity around value, whether that's reintroducing Dave and how do his values transfer to today. Because again, I don't think they're that far apart. They might sound different or look different, but I think a lot of that they can still bring forward. I would definitely use clarity around purpose and use that as a differentiator. Again, we talked about some of the things that they could do from a CSR perspective that could be a big deal for them. And then finally, just clarity of the experience that I am going to have or a customer is going to have when I walk into or they walk into one of the restaurants or stores. So I think it's doable.
Okay, I'm optimistic. Thank you, Kadira. Paul, what do you think?
Having gone through this, I know it is definitely a huge task and it's multiple variables that have to be almost addressed at the same time. But I think some of the things that we identified today, I think in terms of like the brand itself, I mean, I remember the food tasting good. I mean, it was always an alternative to McDonald's. And I think I even, as a kid, I remember preferring Wendy's. It was just never conveniently accessible. So if they still maintain that, I think it's really a question of the marketing. Like they got to really know who they are. And I think they've departed from that. Like, the values that Dave brought about the freshness. And I love what we talked to what Kadira mentioned about what does it mean about freshness, right? And looking at the whole supply chain and eco-friendly practices and ethical food sourcing. Like truly nobody does that well in the QSR space. I think Chipotle is kind of the closest, and that's kind of taken a back seat. But there is a huge opportunity in the burger space to be that brand that would champion that for that next generation who cares about that, right? And if you make it a topic, so I definitely think there's an angle there, but obviously all that comes with a cost, because I know franchisees are looking at margins, and you're talking about, hey, higher cost of meat because of its sourced this way, and the food and paper costs, and so I get all that, and you got to appease that franchisee audience, right? You've got, like, I think Wendy's are like 6,000 restaurants. Like, how many franchisees? So I think that's a tough play, but I do believe in it, and, like, call me optimistic. That's kind of where I think there's an opportunity for sure. But yeah, I think what we didn't really talk about is how they translate, and I think we kind of touched on it, the social media. How does it go into their broader marketing and then trickle into the actual restaurant experience? Because I haven't seen too much of that. I think there's definitely an opportunity there. So there's lots of things at play for them to do. I think we definitely touched on things. I want to say there's definitely the bringing back Dave and the freshness are things that could definitely turn this stuff around.
I'm glad you said that, Paul. Then great synopsis. I got inspired. All right, here's what we're going to do. Kadira, I'm with you 1,000%. We are going to bring the snarkiness into the brand and the full experience. We're going all the way in on it. And we're going to play a little bit of good cop, bad cop. So Wendy is can say what she wants to say, gets herself into trouble, goes a little too far. Dave can pull it back and say, wait a minute, Wendy, or let's not forget about the ingredients, or, get the yin yang situation. But we're going to lead with Wendy. Wendy's going to be our voice, our character throughout the entire branded experience. Not always like, with the talking head, but you pick up a hot sauce, like that's the hottest hot sauce they have, and it says, this sauce hates you. Everything's got character to it. They can keep the snark going. Every packaged item is a branded opportunity. And then Wendy will just keep taking it too far, and Dave will just keep saying, hey, hold on, Wendy, let's talk about our value or our supply chain and how well we treat everybody, So we're going to play those dynamics for a good long time. We're going to spend a bunch of money on advertising. It's going to be completely worth it. And that's our competitive angle. And people will never forget that Wendy's is Wendy's.
Love that. I love that, especially on the packaging.
Yeah, I love like a snarky comment on every bag, and it's different, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think like one of them should be like, how long will this bag be in the backseat of your car?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, like that's the kind of stuff that happens, right? You know what I mean? Like, just things that, it would be fun because like every bag could be different, and you can have, or it could even just be like literally screenshots of her tweets, right? Because so it could just be like you get like a little, oh, that's funny, like when she was tweeting TSA, and so all the things.
Yeah. They won't take it this far, but they could say our fries are bad for you and they're delicious. Saying like that, where you just own it. Yeah.
Right. Like, yeah. Like there's that whole controversy about dipping your fries in Frosties, and like why do people do that, right? There's all the things. So
Yeah.
I love that, Aaron. I think that's
Love
great.
it. Loved it.
Well, it came from all of you. So I think we're in a good spot. I like it. Well, okay, but it's going to cut us short. Not cut us short. We did it. But that is going to cut us off for this episode of We Fixed It, You're Welcome. Just like Dave Thomas, we didn't cut corners here. We took our best shot at fixing Wendy's. Before we wrap up, Paul Tuscano, tell our listeners where they can follow along with what you're doing now.
And LinkedIn would probably be the best. I haven't really updated it too much since my departure, but I am working on a startup, AI-based personalized skincare, where we actually produce our products in France and have it shipped to your door. So keep an eye out for that one.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us. Wendy's, we like you. Don't clap back on social. We're in your corner and we're pulling for you and we're trying to do some good here. Now it's your move. To our listeners, our Fixaholics, if you're into what we're doing, and we know you are, hit that 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps more and more people find our show. We like you already, but if you get everyone you know hooked on our podcast, we'll like you even more. If during this episode you came up with your own fix and you're yelling it back at us for Wendy's or any company that's been stuck in your brain, give it to us. Record a short voice note and send it to myfix@wefixeditpod.com. That's myfix@wefixeditpod.com, and we might just put you on our season finale. And speaking of that, we've got so few episodes left this season. The countdown is on. We're going to head back to the prep kitchen and cook up the next one. Thank you again, Paul, Melissa, Kadira. Thank you as always, and we will see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this episode of We Fixed It, You're Welcome. We go into every episode somewhat cold, and nothing we say should be construed as legal advice, financial advice, or anything that would get us in trouble. All trademarks, IP, and brand elements remain property of their respective owners.